But I appreciate you saying it. Yeah. The Rules Committee will come to order. Good morning. Welcome to everyone. We didn't think that we were going to be meeting this week, but the urgency of the continuing resolution has led us to that. We're very happy to welcome the distinguished chairman and the ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations, our good friends, Messrs. Rogers and Dix. And gentlemen, we're glad to have you. And I know that you both have indicated to me, well, at least Mr. Rogers has, so he's going to provide the example and the lead here, that you wanted to be brief, which we certainly welcome with great enthusiasm. And if you have any extended remarks, unless anybody objects here, we'll allow you to put them in the record, and we welcome your summary. So, Mr. Rogers.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Slaughter and other members of the committee. We're here to present H.J. Res. 79, continuing resolution to provide funding for the first 49 days of the 2012 fiscal year until November 18th. This bill also provides disaster relief funding, vital to ongoing recovery efforts across the country. We're seeking an appropriate rule on this continuing resolution so that the House may pass the bill and send it to the White House as soon as possible. Of course, I would have preferred to have wrapped up the 2012 spending bills before September 30, the end of the fiscal year. Our committee has moved on 11 of the 12 annual appropriations bills for next year, with 6 bills having cleared the House. Unfortunately, the Senate is slightly behind schedule. More time is necessary to complete our work, while also protecting our constituents and our economy from the dangerous instability of a government shutdown. This bill provides that crucial buffer. This CR keeps the government operating at a rate of $1,043 billion, the total amount agreed to by the Congress and the White House in the recent debt ceiling legislation. We also include some provisions to maintain safety, security, and continuity of necessary services. In addition, the CR includes a total of $3.65 billion for disaster relief to ensure that those affected by recent disasters can get the help they need immediately and to sustain ongoing recovery and rebuilding into the next fiscal year. It's my hope and intention that Congress will wrap up fiscal 12 appropriations at the funding level agreed to under the Budget Control Act without further delay, and I would hope that we would be able to finish all of 2012 by the Thanksgiving break. I'm pleased that my colleague, Mr. Dix, has been very helpful in this process. And again, he and I have together joined efforts to try to bring regular order back to the Appropriations Committee, and it's working.
Well, congratulations on that, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the leadership shown there. Mr. Dix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The continuing resolution we are considering is not controversial for the most part. It continues funding as provided in 2011 with a 1.5% across-the-board cut to keep funding at the 1.043 trillion level as required by the Budget Control Act cap on 2012 appropriations. The CR provides a handful of anomalies requested by OMB, including provisions to continue funding for appropriated entitlements, to cut back on overseas contingency operation funding, to give D.C. access to its local funds, to authorize DHS work on national special security events, and to extend flood insurance in the Postal Service. The only matter that concerns me is the way the majority has provided disaster relief funding. FEMA's Disaster Relief Fund is precariously short on funds in FY 2011. The administration has deferred funding for all long-term rebuilding projects and has requested a $500 million supplemental appropriation for the remaining days in the fiscal year. The administration requested emergency funds. It did not recommend an offset for the $500 million. This has been the practice for supplemental disaster reliefs above the annual budget request. Since 2002, Congress has appropriated $95 billion in supplemental disaster relief. All of it was designated as an emergency, and none of it was offset. For fiscal years 2002 through 2006, for example, President Bush requested supplemental disaster relief funding 8 times. Each of the 8 requests were designated as an emergency and none were offset. With Republicans in the majority, some of these emergency disaster relief bills during the Bush administration were approved by voice vote, and some were considered under unanimous consent. Nonetheless, House Republicans are insisting on a departure from standard practice. They are insisting on taking $1.5 billion from other departments' budgets in order to pay for $1 billion in emergency supplemental disaster relief. I believe this is a bad precedent, and one that I believe we will regret as we confront future requests for assistance in disaster recovery. Despite my concerns, I will support the CR. I am hopeful that we can work together to encourage job growth as we move ahead on enacting the FY12 appropriation bills. And I do want to say that the chairman and I worked hard, and we got half the bills through the House. I hope next year we can get all 12 of them through the House.
Well, thank you very much for that. Let me congratulate both of you. It is sort of surreal because it seems that we were just here on the continuing resolution, but that was last year.
Yeah.
And it was just yesterday, I think, that we were doing that, wasn't it? Maybe the day before yesterday. I mean, it does. And so we were faced, I mean, you, your committee, and those of us here and the institution overall were faced with, a very, very challenging situation earlier this year as we went through this. And as you correctly point out, the Budget and Control Act is designed to be at that 1.043 level. No one likes the fact that we have to deal with the disaster situation as we do. I don't like it. Frankly, my personal view would be that the federal government would be less rather than more involved in the issue of disasters. The American people do tend to look to the federal government because so much has been provided in the past when there's a time of disaster, and we want people obviously to have their needs met, but it does seem to me that the constant plan to continue that is one which I wish we could reverse. I know attempts have been made to do that in the last couple of decades without a lot of success, but because of the budget constraints that we have and the commitment to the 1043 level, seems to me that that's what led to this. And I appreciate very much, Mr. Dix, your understanding. I understand you're not supportive of it, and again, as I say, many of us have concerns about that process, but we recognize that seem to be essential. So thanks to both of you for the fine work that you're doing. Mr. Sessions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Norm, welcome to the Rules Committee again. Mr. Chairman, welcome back. I believe that Chairman Dreyer has outlined very well the importance of not only why we're here today, but the need for us to get our work done so that the American people have confidence that Congress not only works, but works in their interest and is preparing itself to finalize a process that desperately needs to be done correctly. So I want to thank both of you for being here today. Hal, thank you for your leadership. This is a difficult time, and you committed yourself to a process that would better prepare our country for its future. And I'm very proud of what you've done, and I believe you can count on the support of your colleagues to see this for what it is, and I'm very proud of the work that you've done. I want to thank you for personally working with me on some important ideas and thoughts that I've got on behalf of our whole conference. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank both of you for being here. And I know we do live in very difficult times. I must say that I want to join Mr. Dix because on behalf of the Northeast and the coastal parts of the eastern part of the United States, in what I think is not very much money that we were going to be able to get at all for disaster relief, and the fact that it is offset. Obviously, with climate change, we are going to be seeing many more disasters. Governor Cuomo had said that he believed it would cost $1.5 billion a couple, 3 weeks ago, and that was before Binghamton and a good part of the southern tier went underwater for a week. and I'm sure all of you know what has happened in Vermont, that what children walking through the woods to try to get to need to get to a school bus to go to school. I think what bothers me most about this part is that we are so busy rebuilding Iraq and building Afghanistan where they didn't have anything before. There's no offset on that. And so we're going to make sure that we leave behind things that they'll probably never be able to maintain, but we're going to let people in the United States whose tax money is doing that rebuilding, or in other countries other than the U.S., they are going to have to go without. Pretty soon it's going to start to snow up in Vermont. I would like to think that road would be fixed by then. That road was so old, in such bad shape, it crumpled like a cookie in the rain. I will tell you, we've neglected ourselves so much, but I do believe that disaster aid, as I see it from now, is going to be about as costly as doing war and trying to rebuild a very neglected United States. I just want to join Mr. Dix in what he said, and I think that trying to offset disaster aid when we don't mind paying for war with no offset is really galling to me and to a lot of people from the northeastern part of the United States.
With General Lee.
Absolutely.
Let me mention some things about the disaster assistance in this bill and in general. The White House requested $500 million in fiscal 11 money.
To the end of the year, or the end of the fiscal year.
And we not only did that, we doubled that. In the Homeland Security Appropriations Bill, we appropriated $1 billion.
And that's a good idea, but the offset
Let
is
me
a
just
problem.
finish my statement. So we doubled the White House request for fiscal 11 monies. We did offset that from a program that is 3 years old and has $8 billion laying around being unused. And that's where we offset that money from. There will be no harm to that program. It's a green motor vehicle fund from the stimulus package that the monies of which have not been used. That's fiscal 11. So we doubled the White House request. There's plenty of money there when this bill passes for fiscal 11, the balance of this year's use, immediately. And that's what we were interested in, is getting immediate aid. And then for fiscal 12, for next year, we also doubled the White House request for fiscal 12. And also, many of the estimates, as the generator knows, from the damages that are going on around the country are yet to be forwarded to us, the White House. And when those requests come in from the estimates that are now being prepared for places where the damage is the newest and most fresh, when those estimates come in, we can act further to provide further funds. The 012 monies are not offset. The 012 monies are covered in a provision of the debt ceiling legislation that passed that allows us a fund of money of anticipated disasters. And that's where the 012 monies are coming from. And those monies are not offset.
Obviously, if that is underestimated for 012, what are we going to do about further appropriations? Will they be offset?
No, that's what I just said.
In 2000, no, I think as I understood what you said, that at this moment you have do not need to offset 12.
In
2012, but what if I don't know how much money you have to cover that? I'm afraid again that will be grossly underestimated the way things are going. I mean, we haven't heard from Texas yet. Now I understand they've already burned a amount at least the size of Connecticut. And
we have an unprecedented string of disasters.
We do, and I think it's going to get
They
worse.
go all the way back
question,
to
Mr.
North
Rogers.
Carolina's storms of months ago. All these are backed up. The estimates, though, are slow coming in from these.
I understand that. That really isn't my question.
So that the FEMA can construct a request. And when the FEMA gets the estimates in and constructs a request to the Congress for appropriated funds, there's plenty of time for us to do a supplemental and find the monies from the debt ceiling deal that was arranged and give immediate help to people. That's so I think
I understand you perfectly,
Yeah.
what you'd said. My question was, if the money that you have, even from lifting the debt ceiling, if somehow we need more for disaster aid, will that need to be offset?
No. As I say for
In
the
next
third
year?
time.
Will not.
No.
The challenge here is, and what the majority did was they put in $1 billion for 11. And then they put in 2.65 billion, which was the level in 2011 for 2012. But the president did request additional funding to take this number up to about 6.6 billion, which will be considered in the conference between the two subcommittees on the appropriations committee, I would think.
I understand the process.
So there may be, what I'm saying is there could be
What I
more
want to
money.
know is what are you planning in the future? Are we going to have to eat our future, frankly, because this auto may not be the finest thing you've ever seen, or maybe they're not using money on it. But I think that's the kind of research that we badly need. And if we are going to continue cutting back on other departments to pay for disaster aid because we have to offset it, it's not only going to be a new process for the United States, but I think it's going to be a destructive process. And I just want to reiterate, and I understand, I'm not sure she's going to follow through with it, but that Senator Landrieu plans not to allow this to go through as long as that is the case in this bill.
In the debt ceiling bill, the Budget Control Act, I think it's called, they established a procedure called a rolling 10-year average of monies that we have spent historically on disaster relief over a year's period of time. And that amount of money is available without being offset for the disasters that come about. Now, the money that's in this bill will take care of the immediate needs. There's no doubt we will need more money as we get the estimates from the disasters still occurring, like the fires in Texas and the floods in the Northeast and so on. As the estimates roll in that are required by law, and the White House FEMA requests money up here to fund those requests, I'm sure we'll be back to you with a supplemental request.
Well, I guess I'll just have to wait and see whether you decide to offset it or not, because I really can't
We're
seem
not-
to
as I
find
say-
But
out.
the 12 money in this CR are not offset.
Right.
I say for the fifth time, the monies.
Mr. Rogers, you can say it another time. I still haven't gotten an answer to my question.
The money
Go ahead.
is not required to be offset. How much plainer can I say it?
Well, you said that we are doing this rolling number of what we normally spend on a disaster. I think you will recognize this is no normal time on disasters with climate change. We've got, till November 1st, just on hurricanes. We don't know what's going to come from that or how much extensive damage that's going to be. The damage from Tropical Storm Lee went all the way to Rochester.
Our interest in this bill was to get immediate help to people
I
who need it
understand that.
today,
I understand
and that's what
that.
we do.
And let me say for the fifth time that I think the idea of setting the principle in the House of Representatives or the Congress of the United States that disaster aid in America needs to be offset, but we can build other countries everywhere without a dime of offset and an awful lot of the money going missing. I think that is false priorities. I do not like the way this is going at all, and I must object strenuously as I can to the idea that people who are standing up to their knees in water understand that other countries are getting better attention than they are with their money. Thank you very much.
Let me just say that we have 3 votes on the floor, and I'm hoping very much that we'll be able to move ahead. We've obviously discussed the issue of disaster and offsets very thoroughly. Ms. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I realize we want to get down to vote, but I will tell Mr. Dix that I appreciate his support for the CR, and I appreciate the thoughtful things that he says most of the time. But I'll have to tell you that there are two phrases that really bother me a lot, and they've bothered me since I was on the school board. And I told our school board staff that they were unacceptable phrases. We're doing it that way because that's the way we've always done it, and no one's ever done it before. you mentioned this is a departure from standard practice. Well, Mr. Dix, we're in a different time than we've ever been in this country. And it is high time that we depart from standard practice. Now, some of our colleagues may not be aware of this, but when Hurricane Katrina hit and we were faced with appropriating $59 billion in an emergency situation, I protested that. I protested it to our conservative colleagues, and we were able to find $39 billion as an offset. So this is not the first time that we have done an offset for emergency funding and disasters for FEMA. Now, maybe you don't recall that, but I recall it very well because Mike Pence called me the mother of offsets, because I said we should not be doing this without offsetting it. That was during the Bush administration. That was done by Republicans in a Bush administration, in a Republican administration. So I think it's really important that that be pointed out.
We'll take a look at that.
And that we not say that this has never been done before and it looks as though we're doing something unique and something political. It is not political. I want to associate myself also with the remarks of the chairman and Mr. Sessions. I think we have to stop having everybody look to the federal government for everything that happens in this country and begin to take care of our overspending, our deficit, and our debt at the federal level, and make sure that every dime of money is being spent. And I have a feeling that if the states were doing more of this, they'd be much more careful about their estimates and much more careful about how the spending is done. And I just have one other comment to make, Mr. Chairman. Our distinguished ranking member said this is not very much money. That attitude on the part of people in Washington when we're talking about billions of dollars is what is upsetting the American people so much. That we have the attitude that billions of dollars, not very much money. That is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And if we don't start looking after what people up here think about are the small amounts of money, we're never going to take care of the big issue that we're facing, which is a $1.6 trillion deficit this year. And I want to commend the chairman for the comments that he's made over and over and over again, clarifying the situation. And I think most of us in our conference have understood that. We've been told this information, and I believe we have ingested it. I'm not sure why folks in your caucus haven't heard that information, but I had heard it 3 days ago, and I'm not on appropriations, and I think we need to become more familiar with it so that we understand, again, the scope of what we're dealing with. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mother of offsets yields back her time. Mr. McGovern.
Yeah, thank you. And our ranking member is not here right now, but I think in her defense,
I was trying to decide which ranking member you were talking about, but
I think what the point she was trying to make is that when it comes to things like war, no one believes it's important to find offsets, but when it comes to things that actually directly help improve the quality of life for people in the United States, everybody's clamoring for offsets. I don't know whether Ms. Slaughter had asked this question. I'm just curious, how much money for the wars are in this bill?
we'd be at last year's level, which is 513 minus the across-the-board cut. The OCO funding comes down from about 157 to 118.
Are all those monies offset?
None of it is.
Okay. Well, I would just say to my colleague from North Carolina, that's a very lot of money.
Would the gentleman yield?
Happy to yield.
I believe that was President Obama's request. I believe that is. And also, I would like to point out to my colleague from Massachusetts that the number one role of the federal government, and I'll say this every day if I need to, is the defense of this nation. That is our number one role. And no other government can do that.
I thank the gentlelady for her comments. I would just simply say that, yes, this is President Obama's request, but when it was President Bush's request, nobody here was asking for offsets. And I would further reminder that when she uses the word the government is supposed to do this, or the government has to pay for that. I will remind the gentlelady that the government is the people of this country. The taxpayers of this country are paying for this, are paying for these wars. They're borrowing on the test. So it's people, not the government. So don't talk about the guys. It's people of this country. I thank the gentlemen for their answers, and I have no further questions.
Mr. Chairman, could I make one comment? The gentleman from Massachusetts and I completely agree on that issue.
Thank you.
And I always want to point out when we agree, it is the taxpayers. Thank you for calling it to my attention.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I brag on the two of you guys everywhere I go. I'm so proud of what we've done here in the House in terms of getting halfway through the process. Candidly, the worst news I've heard today is that we're not going to finish the process. I guess deep in my heart I'm an optimist, and I thought November 18th was going to give the Senate time to get about their business, and we were still going to do bills one at the time. So I'm sad to know that you don't think the Senate's going to be able to help us with that. But I am so pleased that we're trying to get out of the offset discussion, that we're trying to budget properly, that we're trying to appropriate properly. The gentlewoman is convinced that we're going to see more and more and more of these disasters, a new amplitude, and if we know it's coming and we fail to appropriate for it ahead of time and claim it's some sort of surprise at the end, shame on us. Shame on us. There's not a company in this nation that self-insures that doesn't put money aside in the good years so that it will be there in the bad years. And I just so appreciate you all trying to take that step. It's not easy to do, but as long as we, the Congress, have done our job ahead of time, we will never have to have an offset discussion because we will have put those dollars away ahead.
Well, Jimmy,
Mr. Chairman?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Mr. Woodall. The debt ceiling negotiations produced, I thought, a very thoughtful answer to the problem that you are discussing. They anticipated that we will have disasters. We can't predict the time nor the amount of damage they do, but we can predict with some degree of certainty that over a 10-year period, we can pretty well figure out how much we're going to be required for each of those 10 years. And they provided for a rolling average so that their monies would be available without being offset for these anticipated disasters. It's an effort to try to smartly think in advance of the needs that we're going to have to pay people for the problems of disasters ahead of time. And that's what this bill does with the fiscal 12 monies. Now, as I said before, there's $1 billion in the bill for fiscal 11, the balance of this current year. That money was offset because that was before the debt ceiling deal affects 012. And with 012, we've got the new rolling average machinery in place. And that distinguishes why we treated 011 and 012 a little differently.
What a great step! What a great step forward! And just know, as we take to the floor to talk about a rule for continuing appropriations, so often that is characterized as a failure of your committee that we have to have a continuing appropriations discussion. Know that I'm going to continue to characterize it as a success of what the two of you have been doing, and what a great commitment, Mr. Dix, to believe you can get to all 12 next year.
We were delayed, as you recollect, this year by the CR for the ballot the last year. And that was not concluded, as you remember, until, May or June, or thereabouts, which meant we were not able to go full steam on the 012 bills, and that delayed us. Otherwise, I think we would have finished on the House side on time. But we will do that for 012.
With the A's for 12 and the A's for 13, what a great, what a great cycle.
Just one point, both on firefighting and on the disasters. You got to put in, the administration has to, this reason this rolling average is a good idea is to makes the administration put at least that, the historic average in the budget. Sometimes people trying to cut the budget down a little bit will not put the money in for disasters. So it puts a heat on the administration to ask for the right historical amount, both of those areas.
That gamesmanship has been played by administrations of both sides.
That's right.
And kudos to you all for taking steps to correct that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Let me say it's my hope that we'll be able to report this rule out before we see the time expire on the vote downstairs. Mr. Hastings, Mr. Nugent, Mr. Polis. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here. We appreciate that. Will conclude the hearing for consideration of H.J. Res. 79, and the chair will be in receipt of a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant H.J. Res. 79, the Continuing Appropriations Act of 2012, a closed rule. Rule provides 1 hour debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations. Rule waives all points of order against consideration of the joint resolution. The rule provides that the amendment bring the Rules Committee report for accompanying resolution shall be considered as adopted. The rule provides that the joint resolution as amendment shall be considered as read. The rule provides that all points of order against provisions in joint resolution if provided as amended are waived. Finally, the rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
You've heard the motion of the gentleman. Let me just say this is the traditional rule for dealing with continuing resolutions. There's self-executing provision in here that deals with a slight change to account for a scoring change that occurred under the CR as it was introduced. And the measure was introduced at 7 p.m. last night, but there will be plenty of time for the members and the American people to see it, as this won't be considered until next week on the House floor. Are there any amendments? Mr. Hastings.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee make an order and providing the necessary waivers for amendment number 2 offered by the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton, which would authorize the District of Columbia government to obligate and expend its local funds for all of fiscal year 2012.
You've heard the motion of the gentleman. Any further discussion? If not, the vote occurs on the Hastings Amendment. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The noes. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Sessions? No. Mr. Sessions, no. Ms. Fox? No. Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Bishop? Mr. Woodall? Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Nugent? No. Mr. Nugent, no. Mr. Scott? Mr. Webster? Ms. Slaughter? Aye. Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern? Aye. Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings? Aye. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis?
Aye.
Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman?
No. And the clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 5 nays.
And the motion is not agreed to. Are there further amendments? If not, the vote occurs on the motion of the gentleman from Dallas. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. And Mr. Woodall will be managing for the Republicans. And Ms. Slaughter for the minority. Thank you all very much. Hope you have a great weekend. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.